Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But really wonderful to be here with you tonight. Thank you so much. It's a very special time and very intense time, and we'll talk about some of these things.
Yes.
But yeah, I think just to start to say, I try to remember when I met you exactly.
I remember when you worked at the Market Theatre, the gallery.
Great. That was like, what, 25 years ago?
Yeah, yes. Yes, pretty much then.
No, for sure. And it was such an amazing time. You know, was it like 95, 96?
Yeah, it was right about those times, 96, 7, around about there.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. When we were young and beautiful, but now we're just beautiful, right?
Yes. Now we are.
Senzeni,
yes.
yeah, we said, you know, when we kind of like made the decision to have a conversation, you know, one of the things that we just did, you know, the question is that we're going to speak about is like, can waiting be political? And you posted this immediately when we said that, and you said yes. So I think we've answered the question and we can move on now, right?
Yes, we're done. We're done.
But for me, the way that I just want to start is that just to acknowledge that we have planned to open an exhibition of yours already at Zeitz MOCAA. It was supposed to open a couple of months ago already, but then a couple of things happened, including the start of the pandemic, and it just really kind of like put things on hold in quite an unexpected way. I think we all had to adjust and kind of like get used to a different reality. But I'm also wanted to ask you, since I saw you last in Cape Town, what has changed for you? Where are we at the moment? It's a big question, so bit by bit, but I'm just curious about that right now.
Well, yeah, there's been too much. You know, that it has been so difficult to adjust as well. You know, because I've also have children, you know, and having to stay at home and trying to understand the new social setup. You know, and then I think it also kind of slowed me down because, you know, I'm so accustomed to meeting people and talking and, you know, and then probably about a month or a month and a half after we lost Henry at Afronova, that kind of threw me off, you know, quite a bit. You know, and then of course recently, and then my father got ill, and we've just recently buried him. So I guess half of it was just marked by loss, you know, for me especially. But
Danny, and just my deepest condolences. I know that these were two men that really meant a lot to you.
Yeah.
You know, Henry was also somebody that was important in my life, talking about your exhibition at Zeitz together with each other. So I also just wanted to say that, you know, kind of really thinking about the contribution of this extraordinary human. And I know that you guys were very close, and that he did a lot of work with you and for you and supported you. Also at a time period when I think, you know, kind of, he stayed with you, you know, like during a kind of very, you know, tumultuous times as well.
Yeah.
And so that absence is felt very much,
Yes, no, of course, deeply.
Yeah, and then, you know, I hear you what you say about adjusting ourselves, and also my condolences about your dad. He passed away a week ago, which is very soon and recent. It is such a kind of hard moment. So really thinking of you, and also kind of with empathy about my own loss of my father a year ago. So it's something that I want to talk to you about when my dad passed, and that for me became very real for the first time, maybe, was an understanding of time in a strange way. Like that something was lost and it was connected to an experience of time also. And I don't know how to articulate that, and it's very new and raw for you, so don't feel like you have to respond, but that absence just is such a big hole.
No, well, absolutely, you know, because when I think about both of them, Henry and my father, they were so strong, you know, quite physically and probably, you know, I think at the back of our mind, we all know what the journey is, you know, but God, when it happens, nothing prepares you for that.
No, no.
Nothing at all, you know, and what you have to go through. But then I believe that death is a transition. And both Henry and my father are my guardian angels now. And wherever they are, they are rooting for me and they are bidding on my behalf.
That's amazing. That's extraordinary. And I have the
So
same feeling.
Yeah.
No, I have the same experience about the presence of my father. It's very real. It's with me all the time. I also inherited a dog from my dad, so that's been something that's also been a beautiful link. Big's at the museum, Tammy Langtree, who's also working on the project with you. And so just to say that we are planning to have the exhibition. We haven't entirely decided. We don't know yet when the museum is opening, but we are working on the project. We're planning it. Checklists are being made, like a small publication has been engaged with. So the planning is happening. But Tammy also made a connection to that this is also a time of waiting at the moment. But the link that I want to make is that the title of your exhibition is Waiting for Gabane.
Yes.
And so can you tell us a little bit about Waiting for Gabane?
Okay. I mean, let me just go back to 2003, which was not so long ago, when I started with Theodora Comes to Joburg. You know, at the time, Theodora came from the village because that's how my persona is. You know, travels from the village to Johannesburg, and to come to sites of trauma around Joburg. You know, and at the time I had seen Jim Comes to Joburg. It's a movie called The African Jim now, I think, you know. And it had such a profound effect on me, that movie. You know, I was so traumatized by it. You know, because I'm like the first generation of people in Joburg. Because the rest of the family, the older generation, comes from the Eastern Cape in the rural villages. You know, so I think up until I saw that movie, I didn't quite understand how traumatic and painful the journey from villages to Johannesburg is, you know, and because Johannesburg, and I guess all cities are quite impersonal, you know, they're transitory spaces. You know, people go there to work, to go through them, to do all sorts of things. And the connection to the village is still quite strong, even with my own mother, you know, to this day. And I worked with it for a couple of years, you know, looking at Theodora Comes to Joburg and trying to work on it on fabric, because I work on quite a lot of mediums. And then in 2013, when 2011 it must have been, I picked up another book, Jabulo Ndebele's Cry Winnie Mandela. It speaks about these 4 women who wait for their husband in various ways, and we'll go through quite a lot of traumas in this wait. And of course, the book, The Cry for Winnie Mandela, you know, it makes a lot of political reference, you know, to the situation of Winnie Mandela, to how the black family becomes disintegrated. So I reinvent Theodora now into Waiting for Kibane. And then I picked up this dress, which is similar to dresses that my mother has had, and quite similar to dresses that women would wear downtown Joburg. So it's like a poor working class dress. And I'll explain later why I say that. So the idea in this second installation of Theodora was to look at what becomes of this woman that travels to Joburg once they reach Joburg, and how they negotiate space and try to be to have another identity in Johannesburg. Because I'm quite interested in how Black women occupy Johannesburg.
Yeah.
You know, which I still think even though I love going there, I get a lot of stuff there. It is quite a threatening city. You know, there's been certainly quite a lot of violence against women in the CBDs, in the taxi rank, on the way. So Theodora was now trying to live in the city center. But I remained in the same dress, you know, and quite defiantly so for 6 years. I worked in it, went to nightclubs, restaurants, to friends, weddings. And as far as I possibly could, I was trying to tell my story, sometimes to people who were in complete shock and disbelief that things like this could be possible. But, you know, I did not allow Gebane to define Theodora, you know, as much as I waited in this dress for him.
So hold on, kind of just for clarity. So Gabani, is you waiting for Gabani.
Yes.
So you're waiting for a man.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And Gabani doesn't come, right?
No, he doesn't come. He doesn't come. He doesn't show up. And in a lot of the stories that I knew both as a child and even now, men disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they came to Joburg. Some of them were never found again. A lot of them found other women and got married and started new families. So I just probably took a conscious decision that I would continue as Theodora. And if Gebane spots me walking around in this dress, which he should know, he will cross the road and say hello. But the thing is,
okay. So Gabani is going to recognize you wearing your red dress. Yeah.
Yes, because you must remember this dress gets it's men who buy these dresses for women.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so he would recognize this dress when he sees me.
Great. That's
yes.
And so you just kept on wearing it for 6 years, the same dress.
Yes, same dress. No, not entirely the same. There's a lot of them. Yeah. I had to go to work and be social. I collected a lot of them. You know, I still have them so that I could look presentable in them. Because I had to go to work for about a year in that dress. I was working 9 months, a full-time job. And the people that I worked with never understood, I think, until I left what I was doing, no matter how hard I tried to explain.
So, okay, I'm going to backtrack a little bit, Senzeni. So Theodora is the figure of, that's kind of related, or that you related to your mother, or a kind of a narrative that kind of like connects to her narrative and her history. And so you also, in the series of Theodora, you wore a uniform, correct?
Yes.
And the same uniform, and you posed in these very iconic places in Johannesburg, either the suburbs or in the CBD. And so kind of that's, so it is a bit of context for some viewers that might not know or understand that series. And then from that series, and it was an ongoing project, and it then go into the process, or kind of, and this is hard for me to kind of explain and understand, to articulate sometimes, because it was a performance, but it was also life. Okay, it was complete, like a kind of a social living process of the work that had no real beginning and a kind of an end. So you just picked up the dress, you started wearing this red dress, and give us a little bit of context to what that dress is. It's not any dress, right?
No, of course it's not any dress. Well, we call it the Makoti dress. Because when women get married in where my parents come from, you know, they keep this dress on for about a year or two, you know, because it gives you a certain social status, I suppose, in your community, because then women know that you're a married woman. There's a particular way to address you. You go and sit in areas with other married women. So it sets you apart in the villages. And even here in Joburg, and people who knew what it was, you know, especially black people, they treated me in a particular way.
Okay.
You know,
So there's
because then,
yeah.
yeah.
So there's a kind of so just yeah, people would just treat you as by association of what this dress.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And so you said you had a job, and I saw a question from Torres about it as well. Like, so what was your job that you worked in this red dress?
I was a high school teacher.
Okay.
For 9 months. 2 of them are working full time as artists.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. And I think what's also interesting for me is like that I want to understand here is that the dress sets you apart somehow, but you're also part of something else. Like, so there's assumptions that's associated with this, and then you kind of like, you know, so here's Senzeni going through life as normal, but there's kind of like ways that people treat you because you wear this. And I'm curious for you to talk about those experiences, because I think it's also, you know, very important that you also endured it, and like that other people endure this all the time. So can you talk about those experiences?
Well, you know, I think probably one of my, this is now 2005. I was part of the Johannesburg Pavilion. We traveled to Italy, in Venice, where I did a performance in one of the small islands around Venice. So the idea then was to colonize a part of Venice, you know, where I used like bags or Chinese bags, and I tried to draw an island so that people demarcate this place and start writing stories about my life as Theodora. But of course, I battled to do that because people walked through the work and they wanted to talk. And I guess that's where I met. I met quite a couple of people there in Venice as well, quite a couple of artists, some of them I still talk to now. But when I went to the grocery store once, I met this woman who thought I was a refugee. Offered me food and toys and told me that I can, if I want, I can come to the church and hang around with other women who were refugees. And then I tried to explain to them that I was a guest here, you know, and I'd come to perform as an artist. They just left without saying anything. You know, and then I was thinking that, what's wrong with me? Why did they run so quickly? And then I realized that when my mouth is shut and I'm walking on the street, you know, I'm something else, you know, and then when I open it and speak for myself, then there just is people couldn't at the time, you know, tie the way that I looked and the way that I speak and articulate myself. To traveling into New York and being stuck at JFK, going through my luggage, finding 12 dresses that look the same. My phone helped me because then I could log on to Instagram and show them, because I think I would have been deported, because I was there for 2 hours answering questions about what I was doing. And it's been crazy, you know, and sometimes, you know, particularly when I would go to, after the teaching job, I did some work for my brother-in-law. So I'd go to meetings in Sandton in the dress to go wait for him or his clients sometimes. And I struggled to be served in restaurants in Sandton when I was waiting for clients. You know, because there were times when I would be taken back by that. And then I realized that, okay, this is what these people are looking at, you know. Because I think once I was in that dress for about a year or two, it just became second skin. I put it on without thinking twice what other people would think or
that we had. You also said that it's exposed or vulnerable and also protected by this, by the dress or your appearance. And I just want to say, for many people, this is not a uniform or just something to put on. It's life. You know, it's also like,
of course.
Know, but maybe just talk about those two experiences.
You know, I noticed that when I walked downtown Joburg, you know, where I would be buying materials, there were quite a number of women who looked the way that I did. You know, who sometimes would be hawkers or would be trying to buy stuff. you know. So then when I'm downtown Joburg, it was quite easy to have this dress on,
Mm.
you know, because as I said, people treat you in a particular way once the dress is on. But then when I would be in Hyde Park, going to meet somebody else, you know, trying to negotiate security guards, you know, trying to enter buildings
they think
and
you don't
explain
belong
myself.
there. Yeah.
Oh no! Once a security guard came to me, I had a bag, a Chinese bag with me, in Hyde Park. I was going to meet someone in Hyde Park at the mall. Said to me, "Hello, sorry, no hawkers in here." You know, and I looked around and I was wondering who he was shouting at. You know, and he came close to tell me that hawkers are not allowed here in Hyde Park. So then I guess that the dress for him represented those women that he sees in the edges of Joburg, or in the taxi ranks or in the bus stops, would look this way. And you know, and again I noticed that when I was walking around Joburg, because of it, you know, the catcalling stops. Men approach you less aggressively. I'm not saying that it keeps me safe or it keeps all those women safe, but there were things that just didn't happen when I had the dress on, that I thought gave me some protection, or maybe some false sense of it, if there is such a thing, because public spaces are not easy for all women.
No, this is kind of like a very important moment, just to acknowledge, like, it's not, and I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you, and it's also, you know, that the experience of women, and but you said the experience of women in public places is radically, you know, vulnerable. So and it's such an obvious thing for you to say, but it's so shocking every time it's acknowledged. So I want to so this practice, and again, this way of living, then for you it was just going to continue. You had no real idea of like it ending, but also you had very particular experiences with family also related to that. And I'm curious about how the home environment changed or shifted, and how that was for you. Because you also, it's not like you put on the dress, you know, when you go out. You just you wore it at home. It was like, it was everywhere. It was not there's not a costume that you put on. It became a way of being and living.
You know, I think my children, the two older ones, struggled badly with it. Especially my son, who was a teenager and in high school when I started this. You know, I think family members, if I didn't own cameras with tripods and force myself into photographs and family weddings and events, I would have been missing from them, because I began noticing that every time photographs were to be taken, they would shift away. You know, because
sorry, I'm laughing. I'm like,
can't you accessorize this thing? Put something else on, wear it. You know, so I had to. Every time I went to family gatherings, I would take the tripod and my camera, and then join family photographs and use a self timer to shoot, because they just did not want to take photographs with me. You know, and I suppose now that the dress is off, it wasn't particularly the most attractive dress ever. You know, one could put on, but. And my youngest daughter, who's now 5, I had her when I had the dress on. And that's what she saw the first 4 years of her life. And then I had to pack those dresses away, because I noticed that after I took them off last year, October, that when she wanted to go outside, she would go and fetch the dress in the wardrobe and ask me to put it on so that we can step outside of the door. And go to buy ice cream or wherever she needed to go. So for that reason, I packed them away, because I think I was trying to get her to not associate me with the dress.
You know, for her, that it's also about, this is you. You know, this is your identity. This close association with it. So it's all these kind of complicated or complex, not complicated, complex things that kind of like converge here. And I'm curious about this. Then the moment of taking off the dress, so to speak, like it was immediate. It was like you just stopped. It was just done.
No, I didn't. You know, I think when I was in year 4, you know, it became quite heavy.
Yeah.
You know, for me to carry the dress. You know, and because as much as I went on explaining what I do, you know, I was also beginning to occupy spaces where you would walk in and people would like dismiss you immediately, and they wouldn't really be interested in what you want to say or interact with you. And
yeah, no, absolutely. And I just like see Koyo has also posed a question here that and I want to come back a little bit to this, like the moment of stopping and kind of like what that meant. But Koyo says, can you talk about the process of waiting and patience, which is integral to multiple African philosophies in relation to slowness and in the acceleration that we are going through now? It's a really interesting thing, because if we also think about the pandemic, and the kind of effects of the pandemic, besides the, you know, the kind of havoc that it's creating, but that it also has forced a kind of a stillness. But I think also, you know, this idea of waiting and patience, I think what Koyo refers to. Do you have a response to that?
The process of waiting and patience.
You know, one of the, just while you think about that, one of the aspects that we spoke about, the curatorial team at Zeitz MOCAA was, and the question coming back to, can waiting be okay?
Yes.
It's like, but like a kind of a process of saying we're going to wait it out, meaning like we're going to take our time. You know, we're not going to rush anywhere. We're going to stand still for a while, and we're going to be here. And we're going to exist here for however long it takes. And that for me is kind of the key question as well, because I think for me that also relates to Njabula Ndebele's book, this kind of like act of waiting. So can you talk about that maybe as well?
You know, I think the last couple of months, 2 to 3 months, the uncertainty that we have gone through publicly, and being forced to wait for, because we don't know what we're waiting for. Quite frankly. Well, I don't. And I suppose with the woman in the book waiting for the cry of Winnie Mandela, if you go through it, you know, also waited for nothing in the end. You know, because I'm also concerned about who I will become after this period of waiting for the new world to come. You know, how do we transition in this period, both personally and in public?
No, I hear you, and I think this is you know, what I like what you said just now is also about a new way, and that for me is a key. I love that there's a kind of a hint at something better or something else, right?
Of course.
Yes. So.
Yes. No, of course.
So the act of waiting then is not one that is about, it has a sense of anticipation and possibility into it. And then the potential that we are also kind of seeing through. I mean, I think that's a really beautiful connection to make. And I think how I also understand your practice was, you know, this indefiniteness was something I think retrospectively looking at it, as an act of kind of like being, and in one place, for me, not to say that other things didn't happen, but it was just like, I'm going to stick with this. I'm going to wait in this. 6 years is a very long time, okay, to do anything.
Yeah.
So to just the staying power on that, I think is absolutely incredible. And I think that's the energy that also I've so much responded to over the years, of, you know, of kind of also just staying. And I think that's a beautiful aspect of not your practice, but also being right now. And maybe that's the metaphor as well about this particular moment. You know, kind of rethinking about the last 4 months, you know, that we've been in lockdown, various stages of lockdown and stasis or waiting. You know, I think there's so many things that in my own experience has been about like wanting to stay busy, but not being able to move. This kind of like time flies and it's very slow at the same time. Seeing certain things, also what Koya refers to an acceleration of certain aspects of like how people, you know, move, especially in the art world, to like digital platforms. Of course, that stuff already existed way before, but it's now just like the art market, for example, has just embraced it completely, can de-invest in bricks and mortar and can just go completely where it's, you know, easy to kind of like trade. So the objectness of things are kind of like also being challenged a little bit. So sorry, I'm saying a lot of things, but in terms of your practice, what have you been doing? What have you been working on? And not to, and again, I think there's an expectation for us to be productive. So if you weren't productive in the way that we thought you would be, that's okay.
Yeah, no. Well, in terms of being, well, I have been productive because I'm thinking of ways of reinventing myself after the 6-year period. You know, and new ways of living. I'm still thinking about it. I'm not in a rush. I've had a lot of time to think about it. But then what I've also been doing possibly I could answer Koyo's question while I'm talking about this. You know, my parents are religious, were, and there's a lot of music, hymns, as it were, or gospel music, that kind of defined the lives of Black women in this country. Because I don't know about gospel music from the continent, about how things, a lot of this music is also about how people can wait for better things, or maybe happiness, ideas of happiness and fulfillment are waiting in heaven with Jesus. You know, so we always in a state of transition, in a state of hope, anticipation, in a state of waiting for things to get better, even though we don't know what those things are and what they'll look like when they do get. I've been trying to collect that music.
Ask you about Dolly Parton. I was like, we're not going to talk about Dolly tonight. But...
No, we're not. But she's released a song. And when I heard that song, I thought, this is quite strange, because here I am busy collecting all this music, this religious and gospel music that Black women have listened to, that I grew up hearing, you know, about hopes of heaven and how if you stay on the righteous path, you will be rewarded in heaven. So the idea of fulfillment and of living a great life for a lot of Black women is not here. You know, it's in heaven.
Yeah.
You know, because you get that through all this music that they sing in church and all these hymns. And I'm thinking that my aunts the last couple of days when they've been here, with my mother, you know, the same songs appear about how if you're righteous and you live well and you live according to the Lord, the hopes of heaven are there for you. How beyond the flesh, when we are gone. I can't remember the Bible, and I grew up Catholic, the Catholic Church. I have no idea. But I do remember some verses say that in my Father's house there are many mansions and there are streets paved in gold. So this idea of waiting in this world, you know, and I guess generally for a lot of Black women who have gone through all sorts of multiple amounts of oppression, the idea of freedom for them is not in this world. And the idea of happiness and fulfillment is not here. You know, because I think because of the traumas that they've gone through, whether it's been waiting for men trying to negotiate, working, earning an income, looking after families, looking after children. That idea that they always have to constantly sacrifice.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, that their idea of rest and
The rest is so the rest. Yeah, it's not going to be here. It's going to be somewhere
no,
else. So
yes,
ongoing, continuous. The kind of, I guess, the fight of the everyday. You know.
yeah, you know, and the last couple of months is just a continuation of those struggles for a lot of them. You know, and anyway, so
yeah, and it's interesting this kind of this relationship and beautiful this connection to music and gospel. I guess I want to talk a little bit about Dolly and not too much because
yeah.
I think just what you said now is really extraordinary, and it's interesting for me also that you have had a kind of a really strong relationship to music.
Yes.
It's not something that is just arbitrary. I think there's aspects of it that also informs your practice in really, really interesting way. I know that also at one point Maria Callas was very big for you,
Oh yes.
and then also Dolly Parton. But these, what do those figures represent?
Okay, for me, because I when I was a child in the 80s, we had very limited TV because of censorship. I mean, it was quite brutal censorship throughout my childhood. Dolly Parton was always on TV, always. And Kenny Rogers in Las Vegas and in tours. And I grew up fascinated by her. And she had such a strong influence on fashion. You know, those high eyebrows, you know, shoulder pads, tiny waists with little belts, over the top hairstyles, colorful heels. And she also managed to enter the rural homes. You know, so when people went to weddings and parties, you know, Dolly Parton was one of those people that aspired to look like her. You know, as much as a lot of people still think that she looks ridiculous. But one thing that I admire about Dolly is that she never leaves the stage. You know, she is in life, you know, as she is on stage. You know, she's constantly and continuously performing.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you know, I admire that about her completely.
No, that it's a wonderful like engagement then to that figure, and I think there's from my perspective, you know, like I was completely surprised, and this is also my ignorance. But I was like, why would Dolly Parton have such a strong following in, you know, Black South African households growing up? Like, I mean, this is a connection I didn't make between country music, which in my mind, American country music is completely it's you know, it's kind of a bunch of white people. Like it, and of course it's kind of gotten more diverse, but like, so for me, there's an interesting thing about race that also came into play, but I don't know if you can maybe talk to that a little bit, but.
Yeah. You know, in the 80s, TV was such a big thing. And there were so few of us with televisions. You know, that I remember probably half the street used to come and gather at my father's house to come and see Dolly Parton. And because we remember we had no opportunities to see live music as well, a lot of us.
Yeah.
You know, so with Dolly, there was just always this element of fantasy, and she sang beautiful music. You know, and because also it was very constant. This was like day in, day out. You know, I think there was a time when we almost saw the entire Las Vegas run that Dolly Parton did, like almost 2 to 3 times a week, and they would repeat it on weekends. You know, because our TV was so limited as well.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really want to say she was forced on us, but she was on TV quite a considerable amount of time on TV. That there was no way of escaping her.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
No way.
Yeah, it sang about rural life, this kind of connection back to home.
Yeah.
Denny, I want to come back to your practice a little bit, and of course, dolly
Yes.
part features very strongly in parts of your practice. So there's been a series of works that so after the waiting period, or the period of wearing the kind of dress, I think you might have disappeared for a sec. Check in again. I think we just wait for Senzeni a little bit. There we go. Very much. There's also been collage aspects of it that incorporates, kind of the figure. And we're also working on an exhibition that would look at a kind of an overview of your practice of the last couple of years. But could you talk a little bit about the actual stitching and drawing work that you're making? And I think you might have a bit of a connection issue. Let's just wait for Senzeni to tune back in. Yeah, I think there's a bit of a connection.
I stayed on, but it cut you off.
I think there was maybe a connection issue with me. I don't know. But anyway, happy to have you here.
All right.
So we were talking about some of the, we talked about your other practice, like the drawing,
Yes.
the stitching works, the blanket works. Can you very briefly talk about that as well?
Okay. I picked up fabric when I was doing my undergrad. A lot of my work is on fabric. And a lot of it is stitched in red as well. And part of the reason why I use red, I'm going to try and explain briefly why I work exclusively in red. My late father, we're not really sure. Well, he wasn't really sure when he was born. Came to Joburg, was given a date, depending on what they thought, how old he is, basically.
Okay, wow, yeah.
And his mother told him that no, he was born in Easter and at the time of the red dust. That could have been any time between 1933 to 1938, 38, 39, because that's when they were recruiting a lot of men from the villages to go and work in the Second World War. And then I realized that that dust, that red dust, it marked change in the lives of a lot of people in the rural areas. Because that red dust is also associated with a lot of disruptions as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And a lot of periods of uncertainty, because a lot of those men that left the villages never made it back to their home. They disappeared in the wars, wherever they went. And even when they moved to Joburg, they left dust behind when they left in buses. So my grandmother, my late grandmother, would then describe a lot of periods when change happened, as periods of the red dust. So I guess for me to mark that, those periods of uncertainty, of not knowing.
Carry on, sorry.
Yeah. So because of that particularly.
Yeah. Okay. That for me is it's very important, and the connection then back to land is really strong. There's also the series of blanket works that relate to landscape. The blanket stitched works. Can you talk about those specific pieces, maybe also in relation to earth and the land?
Those works. There was a time when I was involved in a class action case around about the reef, because a lot of the townships around the reef. So this would be all these decommissioned mines, starting from Soweto all the way to the eastern to Springs, and a lot of them they are failing those slopes, so they're slowly caving in, So it's residues of mining, of excessive mining around Joburg, that now we are living with the burdens of the after effect. And when I started my project, Theodora Comes to Joburg, the first journey was coming into the mines, because it's where my own father came to come and look for work in the mines. It's where a lot of the male relatives, travel to. work in the gold mines.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and the aftermath now of what those gold mines that comes from these mines, which I used to wear around my waist and around my shoulders. You know, when I decided to slowly take off what I was wearing, the Theodora uniform, as per se, you know, I decided then to probably start working on these blankets, you know, because they were the heaviest to carry, you know, because they were quite hot and I would sweat under them, and sometimes I'd get very angry when people would harass me wearing them. So the idea behind sewing the mine, those failing slope in those blankets, was also to talk about the heaviness of the entire experience, both for me, number one, and number two, from the woman who lost loved ones, losses, which came from this excessive mining and being constantly underground and in closed spaces. You know, and I deliberately made these blankets quite heavy, you know, as a way of beginning dialogues about the burdens of what is left over, you know, and also how mines completely disintegrated the Black family.
So this extreme violence of migrant labor.
Yeah.
It's still continuing today. It's not something of the
No,
past.
of course it is. No, it's not. It still continues.
And then this kind of connection to a violence that's then also of mining, the kind of excavation of the earth, the kind of destabilization of the kind of membrane, that kind of, you know, the kind of the earth membrane. And also what you say about dust, the kind of toxicity of it. And then a really poignant connection to red dust that marks the birth of your father. There's a really beautiful cycle there, and so thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's really, really excited about the possibility for this, also for these narratives to kind of like come through in the exhibition. There's a couple of things that I can talk to you for the whole night. We're not so much time left, so if there's anybody that want to pose us a question now in the comments, please do so. The drawing practice, and it also connects to this extension between, you know, this collapse between private and public and work and life and things. And that's, you started a process of tattooing yourself. And I won't forget the first on Facebook. It was quite an interesting moment for me because it marked another kind of transition. And I remember in the comments you got like, do this to your body. And but you've continued this process. So can you talk about that quickly?
You know, when I decided like halfway through the 4th year of wearing the dress that I was going to take it off in 2019. And I began to look ways of marking my body, you know, to begin the you know, because I think even then I was thinking about the transition. I was thinking about moving towards another persona, which I'm still busy working on, you know. And then because I realized that the last year number 6, when I was about to take off the dress, when people would see tattoos on my arms, then they would stop and think, okay, something else is happening here. This is now not a rural village woman, because obviously it's something that you don't find in those parts of the world. You know, I think for me, because, you know, my body, you know, I had a traumatic incident that made me realize that, you know, quite a lot of things, I guess. You know, my body has been through a lot of things. It has given birth to children. It has nurtured. It has traveled. I've tried to look after it. I think my putting tattoos, you know, is my way of saying that I own this. This is mine, you know, and I'm tattooing it so that when I can no longer speak, people could read it, you know, could read the story of my life on it. You know, I'm using it as a canvas, you know, because I certainly feel much more comfortable in it now than I did when I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
So probably then in another way, the tattooing is a mark of confidence now.
Yeah.
And it's also because I'm going to transition into another persona after this.
Senzeni, we're running out of, we have a couple of
Yes.
seconds, but I wanted to say thank you